Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I always remind myself of that little intro before I begin. It's a small routine, but for some reason, it helps me get my thoughts in order. But today, I'm not sure where to start. There's so much to unpack, so much to say, and it feels like the weight of it all might just spill over. I want to tell you about something that happened, something unexpected, something that changed everything. You might not believe it when you hear it, but I swear it's true. It all started with a knock on my door. I've lived in the same little neighborhood for years, decades, actually. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and you can always count on your neighbors for a smile, maybe a chat, and the occasional lending of a cup of sugar or an egg. I'm not the type to bother anyone, especially not someone I barely know. But sometimes life has a way of throwing you curveballs. This time, the ball came in the form of my neighbor, Ben. Now, Ben's not exactly someone I would have expected to play a big role in my life. He's a man of few words, around my age, a quiet type who keeps to himself most of the time. He's been living next door for a few years, and while we've exchanged pleasantries in passing, we've never really talked much beyond the basics. But that day, I was struggling more than I had been in a long time. You see, I'd been dealing with some health issues, not the kind you hear about often, but enough to make me feel fragile, to make me question everything I thought I knew about myself. It's a strange thing, getting older. You think you have it all figured out, and then one day, your body starts betraying you in ways you never imagined. I hadn't been out much lately. The fatigue was overwhelming, and the aches in my joints felt like they were getting worse every day. I remember sitting by the window, staring out at the garden, wondering if I would ever feel like my old self again. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion. It was the mental strain, too. I hadn't realized how much I'd been isolating myself, pulling away from friends and family, from the world. That's when it happened. The knock at the door. I had been sitting there in my worn-out chair, my eyes drifting in and out of focus when I heard it. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated. But then the knock came again, louder this time. I opened the door, and there stood Ben, his usual quiet demeanor softened by a slight smile. He had a bag in his hand, and he looked at me with those deep eyes of his, eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Hey, Martha," he said, using my name for the first time. "I thought I'd bring you something. I know you haven't been feeling too great lately." I was taken aback. Not that I'd expected anyone to notice, but there he was, standing in front of me, offering help without hesitation. I hadn't realized just how much I needed someone to notice, to care. It hit me harder than I expected. "What's this?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though the lump in my throat was growing. Ben held out the bag. "Just some things to help. I've been making a batch of soup for myself, but I figured you might need some too. It's nothing fancy, just homemade chicken broth, a little salt, and some vegetables. I thought it might help with the recovery." I blinked, surprised by his kindness. I mean, it wasn't much. It was just soup, but it was more than I had expected. I hadn't been cooking much lately, too tired to prepare anything, and most of the time, I couldn't bring myself to even think about food. "Thank you, Ben," I said, my voice unsteady. I didn't know what else to say. He nodded, his smile still present but more serious now. "You've been a little quiet lately. If you ever need anything, someone to talk to, or just a little company, don't hesitate to knock. We're neighbors, after all." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in the doorway, holding the bag of soup. My heart was full, yet I felt so many emotions swirling inside of me. Gratitude, surprise, even a bit of shame. How had I let myself get so closed off, so isolated? I had my family, my friends, and yet I'd been pulling away from them. Ben's simple gesture made me realize just how far I had drifted from everything that mattered. I went inside and sat down at the table, the bag of soup still in my hands. I wasn't sure if it was the soup that warmed me or the unexpected kindness, but suddenly the world didn't seem so cold anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about what Ben had said, about how he'd noticed me, even when I hadn't noticed myself. How often do we just go through life, so caught up in our own struggles, that we forget to see the people around us? I realized then that I had been missing out on so much. Maybe it was time for me to start seeing, really seeing, the world again. And so I began to reflect. In the following days, I found myself thinking about Ben more and more. He had opened something in me, something I hadn't even known was closed off. It wasn't just the soup. It was the act of someone noticing me, someone reaching out without judgment or expectation. It was as if a small door had opened, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't alone. But little did I know, this was just the beginning. Ben's unexpected help would lead to more than I could have ever imagined, something that would change everything for both of us. After Ben's visit, things were different. I wouldn't say I was suddenly healed, far from it, but something shifted. The heaviness in my chest felt a little lighter, and I started noticing things I'd been ignoring for a while. It wasn't just about the soup. It was about someone taking the time to care, to notice. The simple kindness made me realize how disconnected I had become from the world around me. And it made me think about the last few years of my life, about all the missed connections, the quiet spaces I'd tucked myself into, and the way I had let myself slip into the background. I started to see Ben a little more after that. It wasn't anything grand, just the occasional wave from across the yard, a few casual chats about the weather, or a brief word while I was taking out the trash. But there was a quiet understanding between us now, something unspoken, yet deeply felt. It was as though a small thread had connected us, pulling us a little closer with each passing day. It was one particular evening, just a few days after Ben had brought me the soup, when something unexpected happened. I was sitting in my favorite chair by the window again, the golden light of the setting sun casting a warm glow across the room. I'd been feeling better, physically, at least. The fatigue had lessened, and the aches were more manageable. My mind, though, was a different story. It was restless, full of questions I couldn't answer. That's when I heard the knock again. I wasn't surprised this time. In fact, I almost expected it. The idea that someone cared enough to check in felt like a lifeline in an ocean of uncertainty. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from my worn-out sweater, and walked to the door. There stood Ben again, holding a small basket of fruit this time, a casual smile on his face. "I thought you might like something fresh," he said, his voice soft but steady. I picked up a few things from the market. "There's some good stuff in here. Apples, pears, even a couple of peaches." I took the basket from him, overwhelmed once again by his kindness. "Thank you, Ben. You really don't have to keep bringing me things." Ben shrugged, a humble smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I know, but I want to. I don't mind. You've been kind of quiet lately. I figured you might need something to cheer you up." I nodded, not knowing what to say. There was a comfort in his words, a softness that made me feel less alone, like I wasn't invisible anymore. But then, as I stood there holding the basket of fruit, something in Ben's expression changed. His eyes grew a little more serious, his posture a little more rigid. "Martha," he began, his voice quieter now. "I don't mean to be nosy or anything, but are you okay? I mean, really? The question caught me off guard. I'd spent so much time hiding behind a facade of politeness, pretending everything was fine. I hadn't realized how much I'd been avoiding facing the truth, both about my health and about myself. Ben was the first person in a long time to look me in the eye and really ask, if I was okay. I hesitated, suddenly unsure of how to respond. The truth felt too complicated to unravel. So instead of answering right away, I invited him in. "Do you want to sit for a while? I'm making some tea." Ben nodded and stepped inside, and for a moment, we were just two people sharing a quiet, ordinary space. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove, the familiar routine grounding me in the moment. As the water heated, we sat in the small kitchen, the conversation turning to lighter topics, news from the neighborhood, the weather, our usual small talk. But I could feel the weight of his question still hanging in the air, just beneath the surface, waiting to be addressed. Finally, after a long pause, I spoke. "I don't know," I said, my voice softer than I'd intended. "I think I've been struggling more than I've admitted, even to myself. It's not just the physical stuff. It's the everything. The isolation, the feeling like I'm just fading into the background. I didn't realize how much I've been avoiding facing what's going on in my life. And it's hard to talk about." Ben didn't interrupt. He just sat there, listening, his expression thoughtful. He didn't seem to be judging me, didn't seem uncomfortable with the silence. It was as though he was simply there to listen, to be present. That, in itself, felt like a gift. "You don't have to go through this alone, Martha," Ben said quietly, after a long pause. "I know it's not easy. I can see that. But sometimes just talking, even a little, can make all the difference. You don't have to hide or pretend. I'm here." His words, simple and honest, settled over me like a warm blanket. I hadn't realized how much I needed that reassurance. How much I needed to know that someone cared enough to say it out loud. There's something powerful about feeling seen, truly seen, in a way that goes beyond the surface. Ben had done that for me. He had seen the parts of me I had been hiding, even from myself, and he had offered understanding without expectation. The moment hung between us, filled with unspoken emotions. I didn't have the words to express everything I was feeling, but somehow I didn't need to. Ben's quiet presence spoke volumes. We didn't need to rush. We could just be in that moment without the pressure of expectations. And that's when I realized he wasn't just offering me help. He was offering me a chance to connect, to rediscover a part of myself I had buried for too long. Something in me stirred, something I hadn't felt in a while, a sense of possibility. What started with a simple gesture of kindness was slowly becoming something deeper, something more meaningful. It wasn't just about Ben helping me with soup or fruit. It was about the way he had opened a door I hadn't even realized was closed. But as much as I had opened up to him, I still didn't know where this would go. What I did know was that something had changed inside me, and, as it turns out, inside Ben too. And that change was only the beginning. The days following our last conversation were oddly calm, as if a delicate understanding had settled between Ben and me. We didn't talk about everything right away. In fact, we hardly talked about anything specific, but I could feel something was shifting, a subtle but undeniable change in the air between us. I found myself looking forward to our moments together more than I'd ever anticipated. I didn't know if it was because I was simply grateful for his kindness, or if something more was beginning to take root, but every time I saw him, my heart beat just a little faster. It wasn't love, at least not yet, but it was something, a growing connection, a bond that felt both comforting and unsettling. There were times when I'd catch myself staring at him, wondering what was behind those kind eyes, those quiet, thoughtful gestures. Then, one evening, it happened. I had spent the day in my garden, tending to the flowers that had been wilting under the heat of the summer sun. It felt good to be outside again, the fresh air filling my lungs as I dug in dirt. Gardening had always been something I enjoyed, a small hobby I'd kept up for years. But as the sun began to set and I wiped the sweat from my brow, I felt a pull to check on Ben. It was an odd feeling, one I hadn't felt before. I didn't need anything, not really. But the thought of him was there, lingering in the back of my mind. I wiped my hands on a rag and headed over to his house, just a few steps down the street. When I knocked on his door, I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. Maybe just a simple conversation, a friendly exchange like the ones we'd had before. But as soon as he opened the door, I could see something was different. His eyes were darker, his smile less certain. "Martha," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Hey, what's up?" I was just thinking about you," I said before I could stop myself, feeling a little embarrassed by how it sounded. "I wanted to check on you, see how you're doing." Ben stepped back, inviting me in with a subtle gesture. "I'm fine, just working on some things around the house," he said, leading me to the living room. But there was a tension in his words, an edge to his tone that I couldn't ignore. We sat down, and for a while we made small talk, talking about our neighbors, the weather, and the usual. But the air between us felt different now, more charged, like there was something unsaid, a question hanging just out of reach. Finally, after a long silence, Ben leaned forward and looked at me with those deep, searching eyes. "Martha," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something. Something that's been on my mind for a while." My heart skipped a beat. The sudden shift in his demeanor caught me off guard. This wasn't the easygoing Ben I had grown used to. This was someone who had something serious to say. "I've been thinking about us, about the way things have been," he continued, his voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity. "And I can't help but feel that there's something more between us. I know we've only known each other for a little while, but I don't want to ignore what's happening here. I think there's a connection between us that goes beyond just helping each other out." I sat there, frozen for a moment. His words felt like a punch to the gut, but not in a bad way. It was like the truth was rushing to the surface, and suddenly everything that had been swirling around in my mind made sense. My heart was racing, my thoughts jumbled, unsure of where to go from here. Ben was laying it all out, and now I had to decide how to respond. "I never expected this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, I wasn't looking for anything like this. I've been through so much. And well, I don't know if I'm ready to open up like that." Ben nodded, his expression softening. "I understand, Martha. I'm not asking for anything right now. I just wanted you to know how I feel. I don't want you to feel like this is just a passing thing. I care about you, Martha, more than I thought I would. And I think you might feel something too, even if you're not ready to admit it." His words hit me like a wave. I had known it, deep down, but hearing him say it out loud made everything so real, so tangible. I didn't know what I felt, not exactly. But I knew that something inside me had started to stir, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it was just the simple fact of being seen, of being understood. Or maybe it was something more, a connection that went beyond just the occasional visit or kind gesture. "I don't know what to say," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I never thought I'd be in this place with everything that's happened. But I care about you too, Ben. I do." There was a long pause. Ben didn't move, didn't say anything for a few moments, just letting my words sink in. And then, slowly, he reached out and took my hand, his fingers warm and steady in mine. "I'm not asking for anything in return," he said softly, "but I want you to know that I'm here. Whatever this turns into, I'm here. You don't have to go through it alone anymore." And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something real, something deeper than I had imagined possible. For the first time in a long while, I felt hope. Ben's presence had unlocked a door inside me that I hadn't even known was closed. It wasn't just about his help. It was about the way he saw me, the way he made me feel alive again, like I mattered. As we sat there, holding hands in the quiet of his living room, I realized that I was no longer alone. And more importantly, I didn't have to be afraid of what came next. The days following our conversation were filled with a quiet but unmistakable change. Ben and I spent more time together, not just helping each other with the usual tasks, but talking, sharing stories, and learning about one another. It felt like something new was unfolding, like a chapter I hadn't expected to write. Every time we met, I felt more connected to him, more comfortable in his presence. It wasn't just about his help anymore. It was about him, about what we were slowly building between us. We had our first real date, though it wasn't anything extravagant. It was a simple dinner at the small bistro down the road, the same place I'd always gone for a quiet meal. Ben had insisted on cooking for me, but I had pushed back, suggesting we step out for a change of scenery. He agreed without question, but I could see a certain satisfaction in his eyes, as if he were pleased by my choice. Sitting across from each other at the small table, there was a sense of ease between us, the kind that only comes when two people truly feel comfortable with one another. We didn't need words to fill the space. The laughter we shared, the gentle glances, and the unspoken understanding felt like enough. As the evening progressed, I couldn't help but think back to everything that had brought us here, how unexpected it all had been, how my life had been so completely turned upside down by a simple act of kindness. What I had once viewed as just a neighbor had slowly become someone who meant more to me than I could have imagined. After dinner, we took a walk, the cool evening air wrapping around us like a soft blanket. The city streets were quiet, the faint hum of traffic distant and soothing. We didn't talk much, just enjoyed each other's company, but something in the air felt different. There was a weight to it, a sense of possibility. "I'm glad we're doing this," Ben said, breaking the comfortable silence. His voice was soft, sincere. "I know we've only known each other for a short time, but I feel like we're building something real." I smiled, feeling my heart swell with emotion. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them, the truth in his tone. He wasn't just speaking to fill the silence. He meant it. "I feel the same way," I said, my voice a little quieter than usual. "I didn't expect any of this, but now that it's happening, I can't help but feel like it's exactly what I needed. I've been so caught up in my own fears and regrets, but you've shown me that there's more out there, that there's still time to find joy, to connect with people, to open up again." Ben stopped walking for a moment, turning to face me. His hand reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from my face, his touch tender and reassuring. "Martha, you don't have to be afraid anymore. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't the grand love story I had once dreamed of in my youth, but it was real. It was honest. It was a partnership, a deep connection forged in the quiet moments that mattered most. The next few months passed in a blur of new experiences, more walks, more conversations, and more moments of shared understanding. Our bond continued to grow, strengthened by the trust we had built in each other. There were no grand declarations, no sweeping gestures, just a steady, growing affection that felt as natural as breathing. I started to realize something important. Love isn't always about fireworks and grand romantic gestures. Sometimes it's about the small things, the way someone listens, the way they make you feel heard and understood, the way they show up for you when you need them most. Ben had done that for me in ways I never expected. His patience, his kindness, and his quiet strength had helped me heal in ways I never thought possible. One evening, as we sat together in the living room of his house, sipping our drinks and watching the sunset through the window, I knew, without a doubt, that this was where I was meant to be. There was no need for questions anymore, no more wondering if this was real. It was real. It was happening. "I never thought I'd be here," I said softly, almost to myself. Ben smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I know. Neither did I. But sometimes life takes us where we least expect it, and we end up where we need to be." And in that moment, I realized that Ben's unexpected help had changed everything. It had given me a new perspective on life, a new appreciation for the quiet, steady connections that truly matter. I wasn't just healed because of him. I was healed because of the way we had learned to be there for each other, to support each other through the small moments and the big ones. As I looked at him, sitting there beside me, I knew one thing for sure. Life wasn't about the grand moments. It was about the people who show up for you, day after day, and help you rediscover yourself. And in Ben, I had found that person. There was still much to figure out, but for the first time in years, I felt ready. Ready to take on whatever came next, knowing I wasn't alone anymore. And that, I realized, was all I ever really needed.